Hello, New Zealand. This is breaking news. A couple of big stories have broken today, and Simon and I wanted to get online and have a bit of a chat about it and just bring you up to speed. Firstly, welcome, Simon. Good to have you.
Lucky I was dressed and ready for this. I was just sitting at my desk, and next minute I'm in a breaking news story.
Well, you'll be interested. The three topics. Firstly, we want to talk about the Greens' latest announcement that they want us to revisit the cannabis referendum. The second big story is that the latest guidelines on relationship sexuality education, RSE, have been released. So we've done a bit of a dive into that. So we want to bring people up to speed. And the third thing is just about social media ban for minors. The big tech has, well, could you say maybe rolled over in Australia? And of course, it's a big consideration here in New Zealand, and wanted to discuss a little bit of New Zealand's position, or Family First position, on that, because there's been lots of discussion around it, and I think rightly so, concern about digital IDs. So look, let's get into the first topic. And the first topic is that the Greens want public feedback on the cannabis laws. They're moaning about the fact that it was 5 years ago today that we celebrated New Zealand saying nope to dope. And it's grated them so much that they've posted on their website a form for people to fill in and to basically say what they would like legalisation to look like. And I do want to come back to that, because you would have been in Parliament when they were working through that bill that they were putting up as kind of the solution. Well, actually, that's a good question. When we went through the referendum, they put up this bill, but it was just their idea of a bill. It never got debated in Parliament, did it?
No, it was never debated. It said referendum was where the main effort was, and of course they lost. Yeah, which they're not too happy about. And so they want the feedback on it. I mean, are you surprised that they're resurfacing this? I mean, our warning, which we posted on social media today, is that if Labour, Greens, Te Pāti Māori become government in a year, that I would say by the end of next year, there will be a bill to legalise cannabis. I wouldn't be wrong on that, would I? No, I think it's a very fair prediction. In fact, you can just look at how progressive governments like Trudeau's and Canada operated. They just ram this stuff through. They don't really care about the economy, Bob, or better healthcare or education. It's all these culturally imported issues. But look, let's be clear, it's no surprise. Progressives like the Greens, far left, whatever you want to term them, they're unrelenting into these spaces. They just keep going. The second point, of course, they don't care about democracy, which might sound like a bold claim, but the fact that New Zealand overwhelmingly voted to keep things as they were, they don't care. They don't like that result, hence they'll just keep going. And the third, and when you had the picture up on the screen, was it they want to talk. Now, let's be clear, the Greens don't want to just talk. They want to tell you. They basically want to lambast you, if you will, figuratively beat you over the head until you comply. Yeah.
Okay. It's interesting. We put out a media statement just before. So look, if I get distracted having to answer the phone from all the media wanting to hear our side of the debate, you'll excuse me for that. I'm being very sarcastic there. I mean, every report, Druggy Foundation came out with a report last week. Media were all over it, not a single dissenting view. Helen Clark Foundation came out with a report today, or yesterday was it? Not a single dissenting view. It's just a constant media narrative with the same, I call them crooks, journalists who aren't willing to give a fair debate on this issue. So I'm not expecting anybody to reply to our media release, but we were simply saying, look, I actually think that if there was a referendum now, look, it was a close result. And I would say, yeah, it was a close result because we were not only battling the proponents of drug legalisation, we were battling the media as well. And we actually proved that by analysing their coverage. But I actually think that we would probably do even better in a referendum, because the more years that we see the effect of legalisation in some of the US states and in Canada, and even they use it as an example, Portugal, but it's not a good example. The more we see the evidence coming out, the worse their argument is going to be, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Which is why these guys, the Greens and the media, their mates in mainstream media, will avoid talking facts. In fact, even again, sorry, you take that image down. Notice the image is not of cannabis, is not of users. It's a highly choreographed shot of Chloe in the bushes, which is rather weird in itself. But you think about how many hours and photos were taken to get just the right image. So, yeah, but look, media will do exactly what you've said before. But, you've proven last time with your say no to dope that actually the likes of Family First can go around mainstream media and get its message out and actually put the facts in front of people. And there again's that headline I just keep coming back to. They don't want public feedback. And that was actually reinforced, Bob, in the Helen Clark Foundation, the way that was reported, because it was all about we now need to have these citizen-initiated, it's not referendum, but what did they call them? Citizen assemblies.
Yeah.
Which long and short is, let's not have a parliament, let's not have MPs, let's just pull together, as they said, a band of 10 older New Zealanders, and we gave them the facts, which is code for browbeating them until they came up with the solution that, in this case, the pro-drug Helen Clark Foundation wanted. So it's just analogous of this, the wider dynamics. Look, we're still a free democracy, Bob. They're welcome to call for whatever they want, but at the heart of it, they don't really want what's good for New Zealanders. They just want New Zealanders to capitulate to the Green Party's view.
Yeah, okay. Look, I did laugh because in that Helen Clark Foundation report, their qualitative research, so quantitative is where you do large surveys, supposed to be random surveys, polling. Qualitative is where you do more the focus groups. The focus group in Helen Clark's Foundation's report was a group of 10 retirees from Christchurch who got together a number of times. I kid you not. So, lovely cups of tea from retirees in Christchurch, and apparently they are the voice of common sense on liberalising drug laws, apparently. Look, there was two interesting things just today, and someone notified me about this. This report has actually just been published. In fact, it's in the next edition of Addictive Behaviours Journal, and it's a meta-analysis, but also a systematic review. So it's going through all the studies, but also aggregating a meta-analysis of cannabis use and mental health risks in young people. And when they say young people, we're not thinking about kids under the age of 18 or 20. In fact, in the legislation that we were voting on in the referendum, it was under 20. It's not just 15 to 20-year-olds, it's actually 15 to 30. And what they found was, let me just, the summary of the studies between 2013 and 2025, and they included 54 studies over that time. They found that depression was 51% higher in cannabis users, anxiety 58%, suicidal ideation between 50 to 65%, and the odds of a suicide attempt were 87% higher for people, and this is including people in 20s who were consuming cannabis. So just on the basis of the mental harm, that should be enough to say to Chloe, hey, if you're serious about mental harm, you don't want to legalise cannabis.
You'd think that. But in some ways, Bob, they don't care. Because the Ponsonby smoking set, who are more than just happy to have their little cannabis on a Friday night and every other night of the week, don't care about the harm to other people. And that's putting it quite bluntly, but they really don't, because the evidence is there. And we intuitively know the harm that goes with this. The harm, obviously, what you've just described, right through to the parents who are so doped out they can't get their kids to school. But Chloe and her band don't care. And that's what it really just comes down to. They just want their drugs for their little life. And if some other people suffer, well, too bad.
Okay, well, if you've got nothing else to do and maybe a cure for insomnia, go to the Greens website and fill in the form and tell them what you think should be the regulation. There's a box up the top where it says, tell us how you think it should be regulated. Just write illegal. That's all you need to do. Don't fill in the rest of it because they're actually just harvesting emails. I just want you to know that when these political parties do these forms, and I'm sure you never did this, Simon, but when these political parties do these forms and they're asking you for these details, They're harvesting your email because they want to inundate you with emails. It's the same if you sign petitions that may seem legitimate, but they're on, what's that dodgy petition website?
Action Station. Or
Action Station.
Change. Is it?
Or change.org. Yeah. So that's exactly what they're doing. They're just wanting your data. And if you're concerned about your private data, well, those petitions don't go anywhere near them. All right. Oh, just before we go, I did see this article, and maybe this is why the Greens want to legalise cannabis, because in Nelson, an ex-Green candidate, he actually, the judge went nice on him, didn't send him to prison, but he used to be a project manager at Te Whatu Ora, so you think he'd know a bit more about healthy living. But he was arguing he was growing medicinal cannabis. Trouble was he had about 80 bushes in his backyard with 3 kids, by the way, family home. He was 14th on the party list before quitting politics back in 2014. So maybe that's the motivation, because these guys just want to exploit the law and they're sick of the police turning up. Oh, that was one other thing that Chloe said. She said that there are people in prison for smoking a joint. I mean, that's just a complete and utter lie, isn't it?
Oh, it totally is a lie. People are in prison for an array of very serious offences, and more often than not, some will have cannabis offences alongside that. In other words, if you're in prison with a cannabis offence, you're also there with a whole array of other serious ones. People are not being sent to prison for having 1 or 2, whatever one calls it, of cannabis, or even a couple of plants at home. The police, don't have the resources, and when they find it, they don't care. They're after the bigger players, like the one you've just illustrated there. But it's just a outright lie, but it's just part of the rhetoric which the Greens deployed in the past, and they'll deploy again. And sadly, Bob, as you know, mainstream media are often very quick to try and repeat that as well. So again, it's just an encouragement to people to have eyes wide open as well as ears, and always take a second look and second listen at whatever mainstream media are telling you.
Yeah, well, watch the news and see if our point of view actually gets across. I mean, we will be the organisation that led the charge against the referendum, promoted the vote no, along with a coalition of pro-family, pro-community groups. So we have the right to speak into this debate, but they're unlikely to quote us. But anyway, I'm happy to be proved wrong. We will see.
You're always the optimist, Bob.
Oh, I'm always the optimist. I'm just waiting for this phone to go. All right, let's continue. Second topic is that the new RSE guidelines have been released. A little bit quietly, because they were released as part of the general curriculum changes announced by Education Minister Erica Stanford. So the focus has been more around the maths and the English, etc., and even the history. But there is also changes to health and physical education. And of course, health is all around relationship, sexuality, and education. Now, I think you've done a bit of a review of this, Simon. Did you want to make some comments? I have done a bit of a deep dive, but I'm interested just to hear what were your sort of initial key takeaways from this?
Oh, this is, happy to. This is very symbolic, particularly for our watchers and viewers, to know how Bob and I work. I'm the general overview, skim at speed type Bob, so you go into the deep dive. So we'll turn most back to him. But look, my general thought is it's positive. It's pulled out some of the more, if you will, explicit, crazy stuff around gender and so forth. We were talking just before coming on to this, Bob, how it's now explicit. That actually the legal age for sexual intercourse is 16 and older, and that's repeated clearly and upfront. And a lot of it too just has what appears to be just straight down the line discussion around the nature of how we change. I think puberty and all of that. That said, it will still leave enormous amount of room for problematic interest groups and even activist teachers. Partly. Yeah. It is quite a complicated document. Maybe it isn't to teachers. I don't know, but it's pages and pages and columns and columns. So it's probably easy for a lot who just want to ignore it. The other two, and my last quick thought is, yeah. I mean, look, quite literally, defer to teachers on this, more expert. But the page of it just means that ultimately I think a lot of people just circumvent it and teach the kids what they want. And the other is there's a lot of talk in it in an earlier section around stereotyping and how we've got to be very careful.
Yeah.
At one level that makes sense, but Bob, to me, that's the door which a lot of the inside outs and activists will come barreling through. So, really the encouragement before you do the deep dive is to parents to keep talking to your kids about what they're being taught, regardless of this refresh. That's the quickest and surest way to find out what nonsense or otherwise they're being told.
Yeah. Look, and credit, they do deserve some credit. New Zealand First definitely were pushing for more parental involvement and getting rid of some of the radical stuff, the gender ideology. I think Nationals heard that. I don't know whether ACT were involved in helping with it. I don't think they were based on their voting record. But look, a couple of statements just from their summary. One was, and this will be music to a lot of people's ears, it says, parents will still be able to have their children exempted from taking part in sexuality education. Clearer information about what is being taught helps parents, teachers, and leaders to navigate these conversations. Parent-friendly information about relationships and sexuality education is available on the parent portal. Now, I spoke to a teacher, close family member, and she said the parent portal is the key for parents to be engaged with and to be monitoring. So that level of transparency, I think, has been a big improvement, because I think the thing that really bugged us was that a lot of the stuff inside out, family planning, coming into schools, was being done without parental notification. And I think we've really blown the lid off that one. So that parental knowledge is the key, isn't it?
It is. And there was a push, months ago when this was being discussed to actually, again, those radical gender groups to make sure parents weren't involved. They were trying to argue about equity. Oh, gosh, we don't want annoying parents having a say in their children's education. We just want an activist-rich curriculum to be foisted on children. So that is a huge win. And actually, kudos, again, I think you're right to focus on New Zealand first, but, Erica Stanford too, now as the minister, is leading, or at least fronting it. It's a positive. And actually, it doesn't matter if it's science, it doesn't matter if it's in the arts, physical education, sex education. Parents should know what's going on. I think that's just part of good education.
Okay, let me just do a little quick deep dive, because some people will want to know, and I noticed somebody just commented, is this a regular time slot? No, it's breaking. Breaking means we just turn up when we feel like it. So be warned. We will try and give a little bit more notice next time, but it was kind of like when it rains, it pours, and there was 3 big stories that have broken today. The cannabis referendum that the Greens are trying to restart again, this REC just being released overnight. And look, the media, the interesting thing, Simon, the media aren't anywhere near this. I did a quick Google before we came on. The media haven't even touched on this release of REC, which I find interesting. So either they're unstaffed or other things to think about, like what's Donald Trump up to. But the feedback in this summary, they said the feedback was that parents want to be informed and involved. They actually reported that, and they admitted that the majority of submissions that were made to the first draft, which was earlier this year, that the majority of them, about just over half of them, wanted to see less REC and introduced at a later age, which I think was really our argument that we were putting forward. There was another group that wanted it earlier on and more, but that was only, I think I saw that was around the 25, 26% mark somewhere. So it certainly was, half the size of those who wanted it later. So well done to family groups that did speak up. Now, did you want to comment on that just before I look specifically at some age things?
You go diving.
Okay, you interrupt me if you want to say anything. So I'm just going to go through this really quick. This is the guidelines for year 1 to 3, 5, 6, 7-year-olds. The good thing is the word sex is not in it. The word gender is not in it. In fact, there is very little mention. In fact, the only thing that I thought was interesting was that they talked about, they talk about good things like secrets and gossip not being good and just being good class citizens, really. It's got rid of any mention of gender ideology, born in the wrong body, anything like that. And it talks a little bit about self-talk. That's about the only thing I highlighted on that. So years 1 to 3, they really have moved right away. When you get to years 4 to 6, so that's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10-year-olds. So for you, Simon, standard 2, 3, and 4. So top end of primary school. The word sex is not in it. The word gender is not in it. Interestingly, the word stereotype is used 9 times. Just repeat your point, Simon. Why should we be wary of the word stereotype?
I think the gender advocates will use that to try and push a DEI or a diversity inclusion type agenda to say, look, there's all these different stereotypes. You shouldn't stereotype different groups. We have to be tolerant of all different types. And just like this group and this group, in fact, there's 263,000 and evolving genders. We just can't just stereotype everybody. We're all different. So that's to me the door they could use to go through.
Okay, well, I couldn't find anything in year 4 that really was concerning. And then I got to year 5, and that's the first that they bring in mention of puberty, which really is age appropriate. But I just hope that they sort of separate the girls and the boys when they do that discussion, just because that can be embarrassing when the boys are with the girls, etc. During year 6, it's interesting, they don't actually bring in the sex topic, but they bring in the drugs topic. And they come in quite strongly on the drugs topic, and it's not the Druggy Foundation who's written this. No way. In fact, they come in and say different substances, alcohol, tobacco, vaping, illegal drugs affect the body and mind in various ways. The level of harm depends on usage and context. Vaping can seriously harm the lung, brains, and overall health. They've really got it in for vaping. And they say peer influence can affect decisions about substance abuse and understanding different refusal strategies, e.g., saying no in a firm, assertive way. Walking away, seeking support can help people make safe and informed choices. Now, that was pretty strong on the whole drug side of things. And really that was probably the only things that I noted. And so this is senior students in primary school. Interesting that they've come on so hard, especially around the vaping issue at that age. Obviously, principals have been giving feedback about that area, do you think?
I think it's at least twofold. One is the feedback from principals and parents. I mean, vaping is in effect, Bob, out of control in this country. In fact, when I was in the States recently, one thing that Rachel and I noticed was the lack of people vaping. So it was quite jarring to come back here and to see, so many people of all ages, but young ones. The other two is possibly a bit of residual guilt in the members of parliament who years ago said, it's all perfectly fine. It's a great cessation tool. Listen to the Ministry of Health's advice at the time. And, we've ended up with the probably conclusion most people intuitively knew which would happen, which is now it's near ubiquitous. So there's probably, trying to do a bit of a pushback, which is good because it actually says those strategies around, in this case, drug use are also the no strategies which a young person could deploy when it comes to sort of relationships or people trying to foist themselves literally and figuratively on them. Okay,
well, let's check that. So we get to year 7 and 8. And once again, there's a very strong push against alcohol and drug use. They talk about predictive behaviours. They talk about the serious damage that vaping can do. So once again, they isolate out vaping. In year 7, they talk about substances like alcohol, tobacco, and drugs can interfere with brain development. And they warn about peer pressure and social media. So they've come down very strong in the whole area of drugs. They then, at year 7, they talk about consent around digital content. So interesting that they bring in the digital consent about what you share and what you're asked for on social media. So staying safe online. They talk about unrealistic body images, sexualized content, pornography, emotional triggers. So once again, I think there's some honest discussion about the harms of social media. So that's a good thing. Sex education is actually not mentioned until year 8. So it's year 8, And it starts with this. And this is a bit that, well, you could have knocked me over with a feather, but they actually start by saying, in New Zealand, the legal age of consent for sexual activity is 16 years. Engaging in sexual activity with people below this age is considered unlawful under statutory provisions designed to protect young people from harm and exploitation. So year 8 is the first time that they sort of bring that in. Now, some people will say, well, that's a good message. The only problem is that they then talk about communication and respect, create safe and positive experiences for sexual relationships. They say there are a range of sexual activities for sexual pleasure, reproduction, or both. But then they finish positively with harmful sexual behaviours. For example, sharing intimate images without consent have serious consequences. You've tried to play a bit of both on this area, and this is kind of the first red flag that I saw come up in the curriculum starting at year 8. So we're talking about Form 2, even though they say that sexual activity is illegal until they're 16, they still think, and this is the inroad, I think, for Inside Out and family planning groups, etc., radical groups, is that they will then come in and talk about, what's their wording, sexual relationships, safe and positive experiences, a range of sexual activities. That's the red flag I saw in that one. You'd agree with that, eh?
Yeah, and look, fundamentally, I would probably argue this is not an actual problem with the curriculum. Those groups you mentioned, or even a radicalized teacher, is going to voice this stuff onto the children, regardless of what the curriculum says and at what year level. Which is why I'm like banging the drum all the time. It's just really important that the parents are engaged with their children, because of course children are not the state's children, they're not the school's children. They're the parents' children. So those parents, all parents, just need to be talking to little Johnny and little Mary and understanding what they are and are not being taught about at school, and then to step in. That's the second part of it. If your child's been taught something you're not comfortable with, then raise it with the teacher and the principal, and that in itself can make a difference.
Yeah. Okay, so we're not doing too badly. We're told that parents have a portal so that they can find out what's being taught and when. Gender ideology seems to have all but vanished. I'm up to year 9 and 10, which of course is Form 3 and 4, first years of secondary school. Did a word count on this. They talk about sex education, but the word gender is mentioned once, and it's not in relation to gender ideology. Inclusive and diverse, 6 times each on average. So just having a quick look at this, I noticed in year 10 they talk about period poverty, which I thought, okay, that's a very political term, isn't it? Period poverty. Anyway, the substance information, they talk about the harms of substance abuse. They certainly don't pull back on that. There's certainly no Drug Foundation type harm minimisation. Here's how to use drugs safely. Don't use it after 3 o'clock because you won't be able to get to sleep. Don't mix it with other drugs. And that's what the Drug Foundation tell students. We have proof of that. But they then have this section. Let me just show it to you. I have grabbed it. So they do get to a big section on sex education. And this is probably for those who have children in the year 9 to 10 starting high school. They will want to have a look at this. Before this, they have a good section on staying safe online, and once again, identifying areas of idealized images of identity and appearance, distorting self-perception, concerns about privacy, concerns about cyberbullying, pornography. So I really like the fact that they have identified the harms of social media and they're willing to talk about those. They do that in both year 9 and 10. But let's just get to the sex education. Now you'll notice, and I've circled it, that once again, and this was never in the previous curriculum. So let's chalk this up as a win, that one of the first things they do is say that sexual activity for under 16-year-olds is illegal. So, they're starting on a very good point. However, that doesn't mean that they stop there. They talk about, and so this is year 9 and 10, so form 3 and 4. So what's that, 13 to 15 years old? They say each individual has a right to bodily autonomy and to make informed, respectful decisions about sexual activity, sexual health and relationships based on personal values and beliefs. At year 9, they will be taught how to access, this is the big red flag in my view, how to access confidential advice and support for sexual health when needed. So this was always our concern, that they were telling kids, and this actually started earlier in the previous curriculum. We identified it happening at intermediate school, year 7 and 8. So it doesn't come in until year 9 and 10. They've delayed it, but they are still talking about how to access this confidential advice. Get around parents, in other words. Year 10, they talk about various forms of contraception. One of the forms of contraception, Simon, they list as abstinence, which is, they even use that word just once.
You can knock me over with a
feather. And then they talk about reducing the risk of sexually transmitted infections. So you at year 10, you start to see the red flags a little bit at year 9 as well. I would still say that it's moving in the right direction, but they're wanting feedback. And this curriculum doesn't come into effect until the beginning of, not next year, it's 2027. So there is still time to have a look at those, and we'll put up the links for each age group so you can see what's in the curriculum. But the good thing is it's all up front, and it's a lot more open than I think it's been, and there is just a complete absence of gender ideology. Now, outside groups will try to incorporate it where they can and when they can, but it's been a big change from what we exposed and were reading in previous curriculum. So you could notch it up to a half win.
Oh, I think so. And yeah, I think there are many positives here. My only sort of final comments in this space is just reiterating what I said before, as parents to be engaged. Secondly, you pointed out it doesn't start till 2027, so there could be a change of government before then. And I would say amongst your earlier comments around a left-wing government obsessing with drugs, they would probably try to toss this out very quickly. And the only other very broad comment I would make is, and it's my own personal view, but these issues around sex education are actually best situated in a relational context. And what I mean by that is the document, as far as I've seen in my non-deep dive, never mentions the word marriage. Now, look, sex education doesn't have to be all about marriage, but even if we just take half a step back to situate a lot of the discussion in something that's about relationship between two people would be much healthier than a consent-based system, in my opinion. That's just missing because that situates a very important part of our humanness, our sexuality, inside something that is actually a virtue, relational, and value-driven, rather than something very transactional, which is how this curriculum to me reads.
Yeah, I was just looking to see if, there's nothing even about committed. They do say cultural, religious, and family values and beliefs shape attitudes about consent, sexual behaviour, and rights and responsibilities in relationships. But I
suppose for me, it's these things are the figures that sit on the ground, which you go, what do I mean by that? Like the grounding is the core foundations. And, so much of what the curriculum's talking about in sex education is about relationships between people, but that's pretty much missing. So the figures, the objects are just sort of floating without being grounded. So, yeah, there's something to consider. But I like what you're saying. We'll prep a lot of this so people can access it easily.
Yeah, I just noted actually that in one of the practices for year 10, so this is fourth form, so, 14, 15, 16, one of the practices is critically assess how media representations of sexual activity, safer sex practices, consent, and relationships affect beliefs and behaviours. If they are going to critically assess it, bring it on. I would say that's great. To critically assess the narrative that's been pushed through media and Hollywood, that is a very good thing. So, yeah, I'll hold that to that one. I've circled that one.
the corollary or the flip side is true, of course, too, that the school just puts in front of a whole lot of explicit TV and film material in front of them and says, "Oh, what do you think about this?"
Yeah. And we know that can happen. So once again, that parent portal, I think, is one of the most important things that's come out of this. I do sort of get the impression that this government is a little bit more respectful of parents and is wanting to be a bit more transparent in the whole process. I'll give Erica I was about to say Erica Kirk. I'll give Erica Stanford some benefit of that I think she does acknowledge, and I think possibly it's because she's got 3 young children going through this exact stage. So that's always a good reality check, isn't it?
I think so. And look, when you look around the cabinet table as well, there's a lot of sensible heads. You don't have to agree with everything. You may be listening to this and actually on the left of politics, but it's not about that. It's that a more traditional viewpoint holds with a number of those ministers, which is positive.
All right, just the other sort of breaking news is just around the area of the social media ban. Now, in Australia, their ban is coming in the beginning of December, and Big Tech has, have they rolled over? I mean, they've basically said that they are going to comply with the ban, and a lot of people say, well, what about the age verification? Doesn't that involve government, big daddy government intervening? Basically, the social media, the big tech, have said they'll abide by the law, that they will take the reasonable steps required to block users aged less than 16 or face fines of up to 50 million Australian dollars. And they say that they can identify, so let me just read this. Maya Garlick, Meta's policy director for Australia and New Zealand, said the company would soon approach holders of accounts confirmed to be under 16. So they already know the account holders that are under 16. So do we need age verification, Simon?
I think the short answer is no, or rather, to be much more precise, we don't need a governmental system to do it. We don't need a real me equivalent, or of course, as a lot of people discuss, digital ID. And to an extent as well, a lot of these platforms themselves don't need explicit ID. We were just talking to an expert in the field this morning who was noting that is it up to like 90 data points? Your Metas, your Snapchats, your TikToks, amongst others, have at least 90 points of data on you already, all of us. And from that, they can quickly extrapolate age. I'm about to do a podcast actually tomorrow with the head of it's like the Age Verification Association based out of the UK. His name's Ian, and long and short, I know partly what he's going to talk about, which is there's technologies now which allow you to age verify without needing your passport or your driver's license or the government. I mean, just something as simple as the camera can look at my face, compare it to millions of other faces and go, well, firstly, he's ugly. And then secondly, go, it's clear that he's over 16 because of the facial structures. And even, again, this expert we were talking to this morning mentioned your hand, simply holding your hand up. And so I'll be talking more to Ian about that. So there's ways to do this which are not as, if you will, coercive or intrusive as some people are suggesting.
This article says the companies added that they would use automated behaviour tracking software to determine if an account holder claiming to be over 16 was underage. So this has always been, I think our argument, Simon, is that the big tech has been allowed to get away with blue murder for too long. They've been unaccountable. There's been very little legislation, apart from, as you mentioned, the Harmful Digital Communications Act, very little legislation that specifically deals with the type of content that young people can access on social media, like suicide, violence, porn. I mean, I think everybody got a fright when the assassination of Charlie Kirk was viewed by everybody on social media so quickly, and there was really no vetting of that. So it seems like if the only opposition you have to protecting and giving safety for kids on social media is, we don't want digital ID, the good news is that's not the only solution. You can push that one to the side, and there are other good solutions. That's got to be the message, isn't it, Simon?
I think it's one of the key messages. I mean, I certainly understand the concerns around digital ID. I mean, I've been a studier of communist China for years. I'm very aware of the social credit and digital systems they use. So, look, that's understandable from people. But exactly what we just said, we don't need that level of surveillance, for want of a better term. The other, of course, and you touch on it quite often, Bob, we are already sharing enormous amounts of data with people already. We're putting our driver's license into, obviously, bank transactions, our passports. Now, that doesn't mean that we have to fully capitulate on everything, but we already share a lot of data willingly. And I return to what I said earlier. If any of us, and look, people are viewing this on YouTube, they're on X, they're on Facebook, they're all harvesting your data already. And again, you might not be comfortable with that, but here we are all using it, and we all signed the contracts, which is the other quick point to make, amongst others, Bob, is how does an under 16-year-old actually conduct a contract with Meta, with Apple, with TikTok? We all know what happens when you sign up. You get this long, boring list of terms. We all just click, I agree, which is bad enough as adults. But how is our 13-year-old, our 9-year-old complying with these contracts? And the fact is they can't. Hence, we need some parental involvement, and we need some empowerment of those parents, which means pushing back against big tech.
Yeah. Okay, so when we have done these posts and talked about social media, concerns about safety of young people online, the immediate counter is digital ID. We're not even going to discuss this. What would be your response to that?
Well, I think we just touched on it. We don't need digital IDs. And actually, we can protect young people through existing tools and innovations, which doesn't mean that every person has to be age verified. In other words, if you are over 16 or over 18 and you want to continue doing whatever you want to do on the internet, the good news is you can. You're not going to have to be submitting details. The other thing, of course, is we don't seem to have any problems in society of age verifying people for buying alcohol. We've talked about online gambling before. There don't seem to be any issues around that. So again, why would we not put some protections in place for young people around social media? We all know, we don't even need the research. We all know that while it's amazing, it is filled with terrible things for adults, let alone children. And anything we can do to just help curb, to draw some young people away, the better. And I mention that too, because of course, Bob, there's lots of people who say, well, there'll be young ones who will get around, they'll create VPNs, they'll do this, they'll do that. Undoubtedly they will. But you don't construct systems simply for those exceptions. You actually see what you can do to help as many as you can with, I would like to think, a relatively gentle hand.
Yeah. Okay, so just to quickly sum up what we've covered today, a couple of really important breaking news stories. That is that the Greens want to relitigate the whole cannabis argument. They want opinions. Look, you could go to their website and tell them what you think, but they're basically just wanting to harvest your email so they can indoctrinate you with their policies and weird things. So maybe we won't encourage people to go to the website. However, we do encourage you to give some feedback to the Ministry of Education regarding the RSE guidelines. As we say, there is some real progress in terms of parental involvement and delaying some of the extreme stuff that was in primary schools. Still some concern about what's being taught, and still concerned about radical groups like Inside Out and Burnett Foundation and family planning sneaking into schools. So you need to know what groups are coming in. And just finally, Simon, possibly you could just answer this one. What would be our action point in terms of this social media ban? Because there is a bill that's been drawn by a national MP that the government is going to be discussing. I would assume that won't happen until early next year, being a private member's bill. So we need to monitor that, do you think, and watch what's happening in Australia?
I think watch what's happening in Australia, watch what's happening in the US, and it sounds a bit self-indulgent, but tune into Family First, our webpage and our YouTube channel, particularly some of the podcasts that we've been doing. So we've sat down with Dawn Hawkins. She's amazing around sexual exploitation, including into this area. We had Melissa Mackay a little while back talking around how they are dealing with app stores. As I say, I'm sitting down with Ian Corby tomorrow around age verification. We'll have other interviews which are designed to provide more information, because you're going to hear a lot of opposition, and that's fine. Well, we're trying to provide some counterpoints as well. So really, it's just an encouragement for people to keep in tune with Family First, subscribe to the YouTube channel, jump onto our emails, and just listen to the podcasts that we are doing with these experts and influencers around the world.
Okay, that's it. Thanks for watching this breaking news. As we say, it is breaking, so it'll just turn up, and you just have to watch for those alerts on your social media. But we do want to comment on stuff as it is released. Want to be an alternative media, because as you have already found out, you tend to only get one side of the narrative. So it's important that you do hear the other side. Simon and I will be back for Political Playback tomorrow night at 5 o'clock. Quite a bit happening in the political world. But thank you, Simon, and thank you, everyone, for watching. Until then, you have a great night.